Hey, good morning, everybody. Hello, friends. My name's Kathy, and I live and work out here at Mo Ranch, which is just west of Kerrville, Texas, which is west of San Antonio. And what I'm going to do this morning is inspect our observation beehive. One of the things that you have to do is check your hives during the spring and summer to see how they're doing. And so we have a number of hives out here at Mo Ranch, and this one is actually inside, where students and guests can come see what bees are all about without having to put on a suit and go outside and open up a hive. So you can look at bees without having to put a suit on or worry about getting stung. And so we're going to start outside right now, and I want to show you a little bit about what is happening out here. And what we have here is the back of our outdoor classroom. And what you'll see right there on the wall is a nice little hole right down there, to where that's where the bees come in and out of the classroom. So a lot of times people wonder, how in the world do they get in there? And this is how. So right now it's about 55 degrees and a little rainy. And the one thing that you need to know about bees is they don't like being cold, and they don't like being wet. And so they're not flying today, which is great because that means everybody's at home inside. Normally there would be bees coming in and out of that spot right over there, going out to find flowers and pollen and nectar. So what we're going to do is walk around to the front of the classroom, and I'll show you kind of how that works. As we come around here, there aren't very many flowers blooming here yet. Those of you who live in other parts of Texas or some warmer places south of San Antonio and that area, I know flowers are really blooming there. So we're going to come inside here and see what's going on. So the first thing I want to show you before we open it up is where bees live in an outside hive. And what we have right here is a box, a hive box, and I'm going to try to figure out how to turn this camera around. So if somebody knows how to reverse that, just give me a comment on the deal. Anyway, I can show you. So right here is a hive box, and what happens inside, this is what we call a honey super. So the frames you'll see in just a little bit are bigger than this, but the bees will make all of these little cells, is what they're called. Each one of those little hexagons is a cell, and they'll build it out to where they can store honey and nectar and pollen, and where the queen can lay eggs. And so here's one where they're just kind of beginning to work on. And so this black stuff is what's called foundation, and beekeepers put it in the frames to kind of give them something to work off of so they don't have to work so hard. So the bees lay, the queen bee will lay eggs in each one of those little holes, and they'll also store honey and pollen and nectar in there. So as we go over here, this is the observation hive right here, and we have it closed up because bees like to work in the dark, and they don't mind coming out in the daylight to go get flowers, but when they come home to their hive, they like it to be dark, so we keep it covered up. And the cool thing about this is this hive swings out from the wall to where you can see both sides of it. So what we're going to do is open this up and see what's going on in here. And I looked in here a couple days ago, and there was good signs of life. The one thing you'll notice right up here is a bottle of what looks like water. But what this is sugar water. So we mix 1/2 parts sugar and 1 part water. So half and half. So a cup of water and a cup of sugar. And that gives them a little bit of food and nectar while we're waiting for the flowers to come bloom. So they have a little bit of food to eat. And so what we're going to do is open this up here, and I just take this cover off, and what you're going to be able to see are all these frames of bees right here. And I'm going to try to get it to where the light doesn't shine on it. But this is an 8-frame beehive. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 frames here, and on the opposite side of that is 4 more frames. And so you can see all these bees that are working here. And the thing I want to tell y'all is there are 3 kinds of bees in a hive. There's one queen, and she's kind of the mother supreme of the whole hive. And her job is to make more bees. And so she lays eggs all day long. And the other important bee in the hive, the majority of these bees are all what's called worker bees. And those are female bees, and they do all the work in the hive. And if you see a bee out on a flower, that bee is a female. The male bees, which are called drones, they don't do anything except eat and mate with the queen. So they help make more baby bees. So almost all of the bees that you see in here are female bees. They're all worker bees, and they all have different jobs and all have a particular role to play in the hive. Bees like to work from the bottom up. And so up here, you'll see things kind of blank. And that's where they're going to put pollen and honey and nectar in a little bit when they start bringing it in. And then as you move down, you'll see in here in a second where the queen has laid eggs. So there's one queen. The majority of all the bees are workers, and there are just a few drones, the boy bees, that are around. And what I want to show you, right down here on this lower frame, you'll see all these brown spots right here. I'm going to try to get the glare out of the way for you. All of that is what we call capped brood. So in each one of those holes, the queen has laid an egg. And then after about 8 days, the worker bees will come in and they'll cover it up. And those of you who have taken science classes know that bees are insects, and they do what most insects do. So they start off as an egg, and they turn into a larva, and then a pupa, and then a full-blown insect. And so in about 21 days, each one of these little capped cells will hatch a new bee. And you can see right up here, I think, where there's some open cells, and that's where bees have hatched out. So this queen has really started laying eggs. They don't lay eggs during the winter because their whole goal is to live through the cold and the winter. And then when it starts warming up and the flowers start blooming, the queen will start laying more eggs because she's going to expand her hive and make more bees in here. Up here, there's more brood cells up here. And the really cool thing right here that's a sign of very good health is right here. I think we can see that with my finger. These little bumpy looking cells right here, those are drone cells. That's a few little boy bees that she has decided to lay right there. And so that's a sign of a very healthy hive. So they don't make drones unless there's plenty of food, because they don't want to waste food on anybody who's not doing any work. So pretty soon, in about whenever these got laid, at the 24th day, those will hatch out, and those will be boy bees. And it's cool here. Look, they've made I'm thinking y'all can see this right against here, against the plexiglass. They built comb, and you can kind of see the larvae and the pupa in there as it's going. So Yeah, wow, that's a lot of bees. There's probably only about maybe 20,000 bees in here right now. 20,000, right? So in one of these big hive boxes like this, the big tall ones that you can see, there'll be about 40,000 bees in there. So you don't want to just open them up and start poking at them, because then they'll not be happy. Anyway, so up in here, if you see some of this shiny stuff that they put in there, that's all nectar. And so when bees go to a flower, you'll see them go to a flower, and they're getting two things. They're getting pollen and they're getting nectar. And we'll have a botany class later on all the parts of the flower, but the bees go down in there, and nectar is a sugary liquid that they pick up and they bring back to make food for themselves in the hive. And then, of course, while they're in there, they have pollen that gets on themselves, and they bring that back for protein to feed their babies. And so pretty soon we'll be able to see in here yellow and orange circles, because they'll come store pollen in here for their babies. The other cool thing about bees, excuse me, is they like to be about 95 degrees. So a little bit cooler than your own body temperature at 98.6. They will do everything they can to keep their hive at 95 degrees, which is really tough in the summer in Texas because it gets over 95 degrees. And so what the bees will do is they'll get in there and they'll fan their wings, which is like creating a fan, and it keeps the hive cool. So there's some fun things. This is really good. I love seeing this. This is what you call a nice brood pattern, because the queen has come in here and there are no gaps in her work. Pretty much it's all solid. So in the very most, at 21 days, and probably less than that, all of these will hatch out, and there'll be more bees. And so, and there's down here, there's some excellent brood pattern down here. She's been very hard at work. And what happens is when a bee hatches out, which you can maybe see them right in here, you see their little butt sticking out? When a bee hatches out, her first job is she turns around and she cleans out her cell that she grew in, so it's ready for the next bee to be born in. And then she turns around and starts taking care of other newborn bees, because she will only live about 4 to 5 weeks. And in the summer, they only live about 4 weeks. So the first week or so of her life, she's taking care of new babies. And then she'll kind of move up in her responsibilities. And then she will help clean up the hive. Beehives are very clean, and they don't like any junk in their hives. And so they will drag out anything that's in there. If an ant gets in, they'll kill it and they'll drag it out. And they like it very clean. And then she will grow and be one of the bees that's down at the bottom, that when bees bring pollen in, they hand it off to their sisters, and then they will bring it up here and store it in the hive. And then finally, toward the last week to 10 days of her life, an older bee will take her and take her on what's called an orientation flight. So they will go outside, and that bee will fly her around and basically say, okay, here's where everything is. Here's where the flowers are. Now it's your turn. And then toward the end of her life, she will be collecting pollen and bring it in. Her whole goal is to die outside the hive, because the last thing she wants to do is make more work for her sisters if she dies inside, because then they have to drag her out and use energy doing that. So what we're going to do is we're going to open the other side of this hive and see what's going on in here. And I'm hoping that we can find the queen. She's sometimes hard to find, but I'm going to get down here and look and see if we can't see her. And look, there's a bunch of brood pattern here that you can see. And look, there she is, right there. Y'all see her? I don't know if we can do this. She's right there, right above my finger. and you can see all those bees kind of circling around her. And they feed her and they clean her, and she's laying eggs. And y'all tell me if you can see her or not, because it's sometimes really difficult to find her. But there she is, right there. I'm trying to figure out if you can see my finger. Which is a great sign, because I know she's there because I see evidence of her being there, because all these eggs have been laid by that one queen right there by where my glasses are pointing. And do you see her? There she goes. Her little rear end's going down into a cell, and she'll lay an egg in there, and then she will come out and go to the next cell. A queen can lay about 2,000 eggs a day, which is amazing. It only takes her a couple of seconds to lay an egg, but she's right there, and she has these little attendants that help her and make sure she's clean and fed. So all she has to do is lay eggs. That's her main job. And the queen will live about 4 or 5 years, depending on a number of things with nature, and if the beekeeper isn't careless and squish her by accident or something like that. Oh, well, yeah. Okay, so tell Corey, Kelly, that queen bees do not wear crowns. They're not like earthly princesses. But she very well could have a crown, and we just can't see it. Maybe it's super tiny. But the whole job of the hive is to keep the queen alive, because she's the one that lays the eggs. Anyway, and up here, look, there's all these eggs that she laid. And pretty soon, in the next few days, they'll all hatch out. And where did she go? There she is. So I'm hoping that y'all can see her by my finger right there. And her body is a little bit longer than a regular bee, so she's easy to spot in the hive. Y'all can see her walking around there. So I'm so excited that you got to see her, because sometimes she goes in between these frames and is hidden and is laying eggs on the other side. Up here, we have, right in here, we have what's called capped honey. So they have some honey stores up in here. And if you were to poke that, honey would come out. And what they do is they bring nectar in and put it in that cell. And then when it is at least 17% or less water, so if there's 100 drops of it, 17 of them are water, and the other, 83 are honey. They'll cap it off. So it's kind of like canning a jar. And it dehydrates and it gets water out of it. And so when we harvest honey, we want to make sure that it doesn't have too much water in it, because then it just crystallizes and turns to sugar. So honey has got to have 17% or less water in it. That's your fun fact for honey. But up here, they've got some honey stores, which they will eat when flowers aren't blooming and they can't find any pollen. So I'm always thrilled to see our happy queen here at work. She's very hard at work and will keep laying eggs. Now, the other reason I'm looking at this hive is, generally speaking, whatever's going on in here is probably what's going on in all of my other hives. So it kind of gives me a clue as to how everybody's doing. Now, it's a little different in all the other ones, but this gives me a good hint as how the production's going. Now, if you can think for a minute and wonder what's going to happen when all these bees hatch out. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 frames pretty much full, and they're all going to hatch out. So we're going to have twice as many bees for a little bit, which will make this whole thing very crowded. And what we have to be careful of, and it's not a bad thing if this happens, but this is what we call right now is what we call swarm season. And bees are making lots of bees, and pretty soon they're going to decide, you know what, our house is too small. So what they will do is swarm, which is a natural way of them reproducing. And what will happen is at some point, the queen will take half of the colony. So the queen we just saw, she'll take half of her bees and she will go somewhere else. And that's when you see sometimes like big clumps of bees hanging on a tree or on a wall, or heaven forbid they go in the wall of your house or something. They'll just hang there on a branch, and they'll send out what's called scout bees. And those bees will go house hunting, basically. And they will come back and say, hey, we found a great new spot for ourselves. Maybe it's in the hole of a tree. Maybe it's in the wall of your house. Bees don't care. They will go find themselves a good house. And so they will go and take up residence there. And then this hive will make a new queen. And so what they do is they will find a little bitty egg that the queen has laid, and they will feed it a ton of protein, and they will make a new queen. So a queen bee is simply a worker bee that got fed a lot of really good nutrients before she was born. And so it takes them about 16 days to make a new queen. So my goal is to keep them healthy enough, and if they swarm on me and leave, that's okay, because that's their natural way of reproducing. But what I will do is keep an eye on this hive and help them swarm. So I will take half of them, put them in a hive box somewhere else at the ranch, and leave the other half here, and then we have 2 hives. So it's what's called a split. So that way we don't lose any of our bees. But that's one of the reasons I'm inspecting them today, is just to see where they are and what their plans are. I don't see any evidence of them possibly making a new queen. But it's something that in the spring we have to watch for. So this is a very healthy hive, and you can tell it's warm because they've started, it's kind of got a little bit of fog in there. It's kind of like when you breathe on the glass and it's cold outside and you do that, it makes a little water vapor. It's super cool. So we have drone cells right here, and then a bunch of worker cells over here. A bee can go to maybe 2,000 to 5,000 flowers a day. And the important thing about that is that they're getting food for themselves, but what they're also doing is pollinating all the things that bloom. So flowers, vegetables, fruit trees, other plants that give us food. The bees help pollinate those plants and help them grow and flourish. And so what's really sad is sometimes people put insecticide or poison on the plants to keep other bugs from eating them, but the bees go and get exposed to that and can bring it back to their hive, and it might kill the whole hive. Not necessarily out here in the country at Mo Ranch, but especially like in what we call commercial agriculture, where they spray whole fields of cotton and corn and beans and everything that blooms. Those plants need bees in order to live. And so they're super important to us in our food chain, because if we don't have bees, a lot of the foods that we love to eat won't grow at all, or won't grow as healthily as they should if there are bees. So up here on the wall, we have a really cool poster. It may be showing up backwards for y'all, but there are all these plants that you can plant that bees love. So lavender, sage, cilantro, thyme, fennel, all these plants, geraniums, buttercups, sweet alyssum, poppies, sunflowers, anything that blooms, bees love. So if you've gone outside, if you have redbud trees, or if you've got flowers blooming where you live, sit and watch, because the bees will come, and that that a hive is somewhere nearby, maybe as close as a mile or two, because they can fly as far as 5 miles, but they don't like to. So you've got a beehive somewhere within a mile or two of where you see bees, and so that's an exciting thing. The other thing that I want you to remember is that a bee really doesn't want to sting you. They really don't, because if they sting you, they will die. And so things have to be pretty bad for them to want to sting you. So if you get stung by a bee, it's going to probably be by accident on their part. You either pick a flower and grab it, and there's a bee there and it gets you, or you accidentally put your hand on the wall and there's a bee there and you get stung, or you step on one in the yard, or like happened to my Jordan, there was a bee in our car and it was cold, and so it was sitting on her car seat and she sat down on it and it stung her. So it didn't want to, but it will if it has to. Now, so you don't want to just kill bees just because you see them. They're different than wasps and hornets, like yellow jackets and red wasps. Those insects will look at you from afar and come over and sting you on purpose. I think they're meaner than bees. And so one of the things that I want you to take away from this is to be sure to care for them. And one of the things that's going on down here that I just saw them doing is this bee right here. I think you can maybe see my finger. Let me get away from the glare. They're kind of waggling their rear end. And what she's doing is what's called the Waggle Dance. And so a bee will go out, find pollen, and come back, and then she will tell the other bees where it is. And what happens is she'll come in and she'll shake her booty real fast and walk a few millimeters and come back and shake it again and go that same distance. And she's telling them in an amazing way, it's this angle from the hive relative to the placement of the sun, and that's where you're going to find the flowers. Because bees navigate with the sun. And so she's telling them, when you fly out, find the sun, and then go 38 degrees this way, and you'll find the flowers. I think that's amazing that they can communicate that way. The other thing that's really fun about bees is they operate with sight, but also smell. And so they know what their queen smells like. And so she gives off a particular scent, and they know what that is. And so when I've gone to rescue bees or to retrieve a swarm somewhere, somebody will call and say, oh my gosh, I have bees in my tree. What am I going to do? If I can find the queen and put her in a hive box, everyone else will follow, because they'll figure out where she is, and then they'll put some bees outside who will flutter their wings like this, and it pushes the smell of the queen out, and everybody will see it or smell it, and they'll just march on into the hive. It's really amazing. So you don't have to try to get 80,000 bees into the hive. You just have to find one queen, and everybody else will follow. The other thing they do with smell is they have what's called the alarm pheromone, which is the alarm scent. And so when they do get mad, one bee will decide, hey, I'm mad, and put off this scent, which tells the other bees, I'm mad, I think you should be mad, and you should be mad, and let's all go be mad together. And so when a beekeeper opens up a hive box, you've seen us use a smoker. And maybe on the next video when it's sunny, we'll go and do a beehive that's outside. And so we puff some smoke in there, and what it does is it keeps them from being able to smell that alarm pheromone. When somebody starts messing with their house, they would be like, we got to get this person out of here. But it keeps them from being able to communicate with one another with that smell. which makes it a little bit easier for the beekeeper to work in the hive. And so right now, if I were to take this cover off of this hive here, which I can do by unscrewing all of these little screws on here, the bees would be very angry. If you think about if somebody were to come into your house and start moving stuff around your room, or taking furniture out of your house, or stealing food out of your refrigerator, you would be mad too. And so we try to be as gentle with them as possible. Anyway, so I'm going to come back over here and open this thing again and see if I can't see that queen one more time, for those of you who might have missed her. She was down here on this bottom frame, and I fully suspect that she's somewhere still, because she has all of these cells right here that don't have any body in them, and so she's going to want to lay some eggs. But she very well may have gone to the other side of the frame. She could have crawled up through here, through this little crack, or around the corner. I'm kind of looking for her to see there's somebody doing the waggle dance right there. Anyway, I don't see her, but that doesn't mean she's not around, because we just saw her about 5 minutes ago, which is awesome. So I'm going to close them up and let them keep working. One of the things, I'm going to look through your comments here. Does anybody have a question? Yeah, it reminds all the people that there's more to life than the virus. The bees don't know anything about social distancing, because obviously they love to be together. Anyway, anybody have a question? There's a ton of bees. Oh yeah, so I'm trying to block the glare in here. What I'm going to do is maybe post a couple of links. If you Google like bees, or just go to YouTube, you can see all kinds of really cool stuff on there. But for those of you who have kids, like National Geographic and the American Honeybee Association and the Texas Bee Association has educational stuff online for kids to do more. This is a really cool poster that we have here that shows the life cycle of bees. A drone takes 24 days to come to life. A worker bee takes 21, and a queen takes 16 days. So it's really, really fascinating. And I've been keeping bees for about 5 years, and I've gotten them off of trees. I've gotten them off of the roof of people's houses. My favorite rescue was at Robert Owen's house, Bob Owen, 3rd story roof, in the eaves of the roof. And those bees are still here at Mo Ranch, which is really cool. So if you see bees out in public, you want to take care of them and not smush them or kill them. And if you see a swarm, call me or call your local beekeeper, and they'll come get them for you and relocate them. The other thing to remember is if you see a swarm like hanging on a tree, so just a ball of bees, just leave them alone. And in about 3 or 4 days, they'll leave, because their workers have gone and found them a home. They're not going to stay there. I've even gone to get swarms, and they left before I could get there, which is good for them. So I don't sell any bees, Chris Shoddy, but maybe we can find some when I relocate them if you want them to come to your house. The great thing is you get free bees when you do that. How a bee is born or becomes a queen. I think I'm recording this, Clarice. I'm kind of new at Facebook Live, so we'll see. So when a queen is born, or when a bee is born, a queen lays an egg in one of these cells right here. One of these little holes. She lays an egg in there, and it stays an egg for about 3 days. And then the bees start feeding it, and the worker bees start feeding it, and then she turns into a larvae. And I'm going to see if I can find a larvae in here for you. She's got so many capped cells, that there aren't any larvae right now because they're all about to hatch out. So it's a larvae for about 3 days, and then on day 6, it morphs and starts morphing into a pupa, and the worker bees will cap it off. So they'll put this brown seal on the top of the cell, and then the larva stays in there for the rest of the time until day 21. From the day she lays the egg, 21 days later, a new bee will come out. So within the next week to 10 days, probably, all these bees in here will hatch out. You can't kind of, there you are. They'll all hatch out, and I'm going to have a ton of bees in here that I'm going to have to figure out what to do with. Now, when a queen is born, when she's an egg, the worker bees will feed her a lot of what's called royal jelly. So it's like super nutrient-rich stuff. And her cell will look kind of like a peanut shell because she's a bigger bee. And so it takes her 16 days to grow, and then she'll hatch out and take over and start laying eggs. Well, she has to go on some mating flights, and then she'll come back and lay eggs. But the reason they would have a new queen, there's several reasons. One is the queen gets old and dies. So she's 4 years old and she dies. Or she gets old and she stops making a really pretty brood pattern. At which point the hive is like, you know what? You're pretty much done and we need to replace you. So they will make what's called supersedure cells. So they'll make themselves a new queen and they'll kill her. And when the new queens hatch, one of them will win because they'll fight to the death, and one will sting all the others, and then she'll be the boss and she takes over. So that's another way. Another way a queen is born is when the hive swarms. So the old queen leaves and takes everybody with her and leaves everybody here, half the hive here, and they have to figure out how they're going to have a new leader, so they'll make themselves a new queen. Or it's the beekeeper's fault. So when the beekeeper gets into the hive and starts moving frames around, if they're not careful, they can smush the queen. So you always look for the queen, and you don't want to set her frame down outside where she falls off in the grass or whatever. So sometimes they make a new queen because it's beekeeper error. So they don't just make a new queen for the heck of it, because this queen right here, she's doing really well. And yes, it's the same royal jelly that's in beauty products, Kelly. So the stuff you put on your face. And hey, Brandy, and all the shotties, love y'all too. Oh, I have been stung. I've been stung a bunch of times. I will say that really the only time I've been stung is when I've been careless or thought, oh, they're in a good mood today. I can just open my hive with bare hands or not wear a veil or a suit. I've been stung on my face. I've been stung on my hands. I've been stung on my ankles. I've been stung on the ear. Sometimes 3 or 4 times at once. And it's really not too bad compared to a hornet or a wasp. Anyway, you have to be careful with that. But it's been my fault for not being prepared. Anyway, I think our outdoor ed people are here, and they're going to feed some animals. You can say hi to Stephen and DJ. They're going to go feed the snakes and the turtles and all the stuff that we have for our classroom here. Anyway, so keep thinking of your questions. Last one. What happens when the bee dies, and how does the hive respond? When a worker bee dies, they respond pretty quickly, and if she dies in the hive, they will drag her body out and put it outside. If she dies out in the wild, honestly, no one will notice, because their concern is not for her, but for the whole health of the hive. So there's so many worker bees that no one really notices. The only time anybody notices anything is when the queen dies, because then they'll go into emergency mode. and they're like, oh my gosh, we've got to make us a new queen because we can't function without it. The cool thing is, and I'll leave y'all with this, is that drone bees, the boy bees, of which there are usually very few, when it comes time to be in November, when all the nectar has stopped flowing and they're getting ready for winter, all the worker bees will kick all the drones out of the hive. So all the female bees kick all the boy bees out of the hive because they don't need anybody hanging around in the winter who's not going to be doing any work, yet eating all the food. So they will either sting them and throw their bodies out of the hive or block the hole to where they can't get in the entrance. And it's really fascinating. And the other cool thing is that come this time of year, when the queen needs more drones, when she goes to each one of those cells to lay an egg, she can decide whether that's going to be a worker bee or a drone. So she can just make her more drones when she needs them. Isn't that amazing? So when she was here, and I'm trying to block the glare with these drone cells right here, she just decided, it's probably good for us to have some drones because we have plenty of food. It's going to be fine. We may be getting ready to swarm, so that way the new queen will have somebody to mate with, and so it's a sign of a good, healthy hive. Okay, so that's probably all you wanted to know about bees and more. If you have questions, let me know. I'll try to do another video where we go outside and open up this is a real hive, but one that's in a box, and see what's going on in there, because I'll have to go inspect them as well. And appreciate y'all paying attention and listening, and do your part to save the bees. We'll see you soon. Go wash your hands now, okay? Love y'all. Bye-bye. Let me see if I can figure out how to say goodbye to y'all.